So next week will be our first real week talking about the offseason to come for the Mariners, but today we'll set the stage for those discussions. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Friday, October 24th, 2025. This is Tony Gonzalez and Colby Zato for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. And as always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, we have a Patreon. It's called Control the Zone, and on there we talk Mariners, Seahawks, all that good stuff. For more information, go to patreon.com/control the zone. Link in the description of this episode. So on the show today, we're going to set the stage for some of our off-season discussions in the weeks to come. We're going to finally go over the Mariners arbitration projections and familiarize ourselves with them. Jerry Dipoto also spoke to the media yesterday. We'll talk about one of the things he said, and that should lead us into our final topic of the day, which is the Mariners' biggest free agent, Josh Naylor. We'll talk about what we think he'll get, what the biggest obstacles in those negotiations might be, and all that. But let's start here with the arbitration projections from MLB Trade Rumors, which dropped a couple weeks ago. I think it was actually while the Mariners were still playing the Tigers, but obviously we were still busy talking about playoff baseball, so we never got around to them. So we're finally getting around to them now. And MLB Trade Rumors is very accurate with these things. We use them pretty much as the gospel when we go to do our off-season plan and all that. They might be like, a couple $100,000 off here and there on some of these projections, but for the most part, they're pretty spot on. So 10 Mariners eligible for arbitration this winter. Starts with Trent Thornton, $2.5 million. Randy Arozarena, the big one here, $18.2 million. Logan Gilbert, $10 million. Gabe Spire, $1.7 million. George Kirby, $5.4 million. Taylor Saucedo, $1.1 million. Matt Brash, $1.8 million. Luke Raley, $1.8 million. Gregory Santos, $800,000. And Bryce Miller, $2.4 million. So the guy that jumps out is the first one that I mentioned here. Trent Thornton, $2.5 million coming off of the torn Achilles. I think it's pretty safe to assume that he's getting non-tendered. Now, I do think the Mariners will maybe try to bring him back and let him rehab under their supervision, but they're definitely not going to pay him $2.5 million to rehab from a torn Achilles. After that, though, there's Saucedo at like $1.1 million. Obviously, he didn't have really much of an impact at all on the 2025 club, but it's also not a ton of money. Luke Raley had a down year, but $1.8 million isn't a whole lot. Gregory Santos is another guy that's kind of in the Saucedo range of like, it's not a lot of money. And for Santos, it's like $20,000 above league minimum. Yeah. But obviously, he didn't have really any impact at all on the 2025 club. So any of those guys you're going, I'm good, even though it's a small number.
Like Thornton and Saucedo are no-brainers. You can non-tender them, probably get them back for league minimum. Thornton, you might throw some kind of incentive deal at him where, hey, if you pitch 30 games for us this year, I don't know what the recovery is on an Achilles tear for a pitcher, but I think it's safe to say that, it's going to be a while. So, if you can get 30 every 10 outings, you get like $100,000 or whatever. And you sign him to the league minimum, maybe even a minor league deal with an opt-out date. Now, they didn't do that with Sam Haggerty a few years ago. A different situation, I know, but Haggerty wasn't going to make a ton in ARB either, and they didn't tender him, and then they didn't sign him to a deal or a minor league deal. So, but yeah, $2.5 million is just, it's a decent chunk of change just for who Trent Thornton is. Not that he's not worth it when he's healthy. But even if he was healthy, that would be a number you would look at and be like, maybe not, but he's not. So Thornton's an easy one. Saucedo, I don't care if it's 300 grand over league minimum. It's 300 grand over league minimum. Like you're not paying that guy more than league minimum when you're probably DFAing him anyways. Like he's not going to be on your 40 man. So there's no reason to tender him. So those two guys are pretty easy. And I say easy, meaning like from a baseball, payroll standpoint, easy decisions. We like those guys. Obviously not that easy. None of these are, but those are the two that stand out right away. The Luke Raley one is probably the most interesting because Raley at 1.8, he was kind of a non-factor this year, unfortunately. Couple different oblique injuries, one oblique injury and then a re-aggravation of it. Also had some back issues, had some vision issues. So it's an interesting point because we know Luke Raley, when he's healthy and when he is utilized properly, is a good player. He was good for you in 2024. He was good for the Rays in 2023. And it's pretty easy to excuse this year with all the injuries that he had to deal with. And you look at where your current roster is right now and you say, well, we do not have an answer in right field as things stand. And we are pretty sure we're going to have an answer at first base in Josh Naylor. We're certainly hopeful that we have an answer at first base in Naylor. So we don't need to worry about Raley, learning how to play first. And it's less than $2 million for a guy who's it was a 130 WRC plus just, 2 years
ago. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting one, but he is a platoon bat. Shouldn't really face lefties at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the Mariners got essentially 2024 Luke Raley from Dominic Canzone, who's going to make the league minimum, which is $1 million less than Raley's going to make. Now Raley isn't anywhere near as good of a base runner or a defender. So that's an interesting one. I would pay him the 1.8. I think he's well worth it. And even if let's say, I don't know, maybe he doesn't make the team, maybe he doesn't get better, you're going to be able to trade that or at least eat $1.8 million. It's really not that big of a deal. So I would tender him the 1.8.
I'd be very surprised if they did not tender him. Right, at the very least, I think they're going to trade him. They're going to trade him. They could easily trade him to Colorado or Chicago or just a roster that just needs warm bodies and wants to take a shot on a guy. Maybe they can flip him at the deadline.
Or it's you trading for a guy and the other team might want a major league piece back so that they can compete next year while trading one of their better players. And so you flip them Luke Raley. Spoiler alerts for my offseason plan. So it's kind of one of those things. I think the value of tendering him is much greater than the risk, but I think there's also a better than zero chance that they just choose not to tender him. But I think they should, and I think they will ultimately.
Yeah. Santos.
Yeah, no brainer. It's 20 grand over.
Yeah.
Like you
still
take
have the shot.
You still have him for 2 more years after this. You don't want to not pick up, 800 grand and then have this guy go back to what he was before you acquired him. So, and if he's not ever going to be that guy again, who cares? It's 800 grand. You non-tender him next year. Like that's the same amount you're going to spend on Emerson Hancock. You wouldn't rather take a shot on Gregory Santos than Emerson Hancock or Luke Jackson. Like, come on. So, that's a no-brainer.
Yep. So lastly here, because everyone else, no brainer. Obviously, Randy Arozarena, they're going to tender him. There's no risk of that not happening there. But at $18.2 million, given what our expectations are for how the Mariners are going to spend until we're proven otherwise, and we'll talk a little bit more about payroll in the next segment, but is that too prohibitive at $18.2 million for the player that Randy ultimately is? Really good hitter this year, had one of his best offensive seasons, but also a very bad corner outfield defender. Yeah. Like $18.2 million again for what the Mariners' spending habits are.
Yeah. It's a bargain compared to the player that Randy is. Randy goes on the open market this winter. He's making at least $20 million a year.
Yep.
I mean, there's no reason he wouldn't. So, it's again, because of how the Mariners spend, it's the only reason it's a question. If this was the Yankees, right? Like, of course they'd pick him up. If it was the Dodgers, of course they'd pick him up. But the Mariners, I think it's fair to ask, like, can you better spend that $18 million and get a player who better fits your ball club? But like, I think they really like Randy in the clubhouse. I know obviously him and Julio are really good buds now and all that.
I would say to that question, can you spend the money better? I would really not like to see them try. Like, I don't think I have high confidence in their ability to actually properly accomplish that.
Like, look, we already know they need to add another outfielder because right field was a disaster for them. And really it's from September until the end of the year. So they need to add another outfielder. Do you want to have to try and add two? And one of them has to be better than Randy, who's a 3-win player, could go 30-30. I know the defense isn't great, but you can live with it, especially if he's going to hit. And Randy, the offensive floor is still actually pretty high because he walks a lot. So at the very least, you're going to get walks and you steal bases as a result. So it's kind of one of those things where, can you do better for $18 million? Maybe. Is it a risk worth taking? No, because you can fit him in. Like we talked about this, like even with the ARB estimate of $18 million, the Mariners are still, $20-30 million under where they were to end the year, which we're talking about here in a second, is the minimum starting point, according to Jerry Dipoto. But we'll talk about why that's, iffy in just a second. So I don't think you should try. Obviously, you're going to tender him. You might trade him because he's only got a year left. I don't think they see Randy as an extension candidate. Wrong side of 30, defense is already declining, all that. Same reasons Teoscar Hernandez wasn't really all that much in consideration for, re-signing and all that. But there's also a decent chance, you could just slap the qualifying offer on him at the end of this year and get a draft pick the next year. If assuming he has a good enough year that you think it's worth slapping the QO on him, it'll be $22 million. As long as he's a 3-1 player, he's worth that. So even if he accepts, you're still fine and you get him for an extra year. So I think, Randy, it's really no question you're going to slap the key, or you're going to tender him, and then you see where it goes from there. Maybe you end up trading him in the middle of the year. I don't know. Maybe you end up trading him this winter. I don't know. But Randy, to me, at $18 million, I know he didn't have a great postseason, but his floor, offensive floor, is still pretty darn high because he walks a lot, he steals a lot of bases, and you kind of live with the defense because he could also pop 30 homers as well, and he's well liked. So I think the decision on Randy is pretty easy. You tender him. And I would be pretty surprised if he wasn't at your opening day left fielder or DH.
Yeah. I'd be surprised as well. Like, I think he'll stick around. I don't think whatever you would get via trade for him is worth it and worth the headache of trying to replace him and all that. So, and I just, like you said, I do think that they really, really like him and they really like the fit. And he's kind of found a home here. Now it might still be temporary. It might only be for 2026. But it does seem like he's fit very well, and obviously he has a great relationship with Julio and all that. So I don't know if you also want to disrupt that as well. All right, so we're going to switch things up here. We're going to talk a little bit about what Jerry Dipoto had to say to the media yesterday at T-Mobile Park in just a moment. But first, a reminder: this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Rougiette. Fellas, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Go Long. This isn't just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications and 1 dual-action formula, so you can get hard and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to RUGIET.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So yesterday, Jerry Dipoto, Dan Wilson, and Justin Hollander all made themselves available to the media. It was more of like a, hey, we're here if you have questions type of thing, rather than a more official press conference / state of the organization. The general tone yesterday, pretty somber, pretty emotional, obviously coming off of what happened earlier this week. Justin Hollander fighting through tears, talking about Monday night's game. Jerry fighting through tears. I think that's the first time I've ever seen Jerry be emotional like that, in that sense, like where he's like on the verge of crying. So that was pretty wild to see, frankly. But I want to talk maybe a little bit about all that stuff, but for the most part, I want to talk about what Jerry had to say about payroll for 2026. As we, again, we're kind of setting the stage for our off-season discussions to come here in the coming weeks. Dipoto said that he expects payroll this offseason to start where it was at the end of 2025, which is one of the highest payrolls the Mariners have ever run out there. Now, we have heard Jerry say similar things in the past. And while it's technically been true in the end, it hasn't gotten to a point where it's been satisfactory to us, to the fan base.
Are really noticeable.
Yeah, right. It hasn't been like that significant of an uptick in payroll. So who knows how this is ultimately going to turn out. I did find it interesting, though. I'm not sure who exactly asked him, but someone asked him yesterday. They were like, do you think because of the playoff run that incentivizes, an ownership group to spend more and all that? And Jerry said, I don't have the answer for you. I'm not the person to ask that question to. I thought that was some actual growth there from Jerry, who has at times done backflips to try and, cover for ownership.
Carry the water, so to speak.
Yeah. I thought that was actually kind of a cool answer from Jerry. Like, I don't know. You ask them, right? Like, so.
In like a 3-day span, we got Russell Wilson finally taking off the mask and taking shots, and Jerry Dipoto doing the same. Good. It's a good week for Seattle sports, aside from the first 3 days of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, we talked about it a lot. We got a mailbag question yesterday about, has there ever been an ownership group that's like actually spent after a deep playoff run when they normally don't? And yeah, the Diamondbacks pretty famously did it. But, as for whether or not Stanton and company are going to do it, I think, seeing is believing in this case. And until they actually do it, assume they won't. Jerry's talked about this in the past. He's talked about like, yeah, we've got total, like we got all the money we think we need, blah, blah, blah. And then we come to find out, not that Jerry will ever say it, but the rug gets pulled out from under him. And it's happened, a couple off seasons in a row, and it still could happen here. We are much closer to free agency, but I believe one time the rug was pulled out from under Jerry's feet about 24 to 48 hours before free agency started. So there's still time for ownership to do another 180. But Jerry's saying it's going to start where it ended this year. And then also indicating that it would go beyond that as well. Is a pretty, to amongst the highest we've ever had with the Mariners. I think their high was 180, 188, something like that in the last year of the Cano, Cruz, Seager era. So we'll see where it winds up. But, if it is 165, which is about where it ended this year, then the Mariners right now, assuming they tender everybody and assuming, they didn't make any outside additions, their payroll would be about 130, 135, somewhere in that range. Is a little hard to tell. There's some wiggle room there, which, in theory would give them about $30 million. But obviously they have Naylor they want to re-sign, and Polo and Gino. And so that 30 million is going to dry up pretty quick. So we'll see what the ultimate number is, but it does need to be higher. And at least Jerry, seemed to indicate it would be, but also so it wouldn't be the first time that ownership sent Jerry out there to the media and then called him back behind closed doors and was like, Actually, yeah.
Or, it will be higher than that. It'll be 166 million.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about like adding like last year. Remember they had like $16 million to spend. Their opening day payroll last year was only like $1 million more than the previous season's end of year payroll. So who knows? And obviously there's the whole, the lockout is looming, and there's the TV deal that they don't have anymore. So there's a lot of things still in play here. Again, I'm a big believer in make the ownership prove it to you before you do anything. So until they do, I don't think that I'm not going to take Jerry's word for it, but I mean, he said the right things, which I guess is something.
Yeah. I thought it was nice to see, Justin and Jerry kind of be real about it, for a moment, and be real about how much it hurt them. Cause I mean, like, for us, like, especially like for you and I, like, this thing is almost every day for us. I mean, it is every single, weekday for us. But even then, like, there are times that we can take a step back and kind of remove ourselves from baseball. And same thing with the fan base. Like, you can just turn the game off and just be done with it, Yeah. But for Jerry and Justin, it's like, you're living this, right? This is your life. I mean, the hours that they've probably spent at that ballpark are insane, would blow our minds. So, to see them just be real about it, like how much it hurts, and like you can just see it on their face, like, that was nice. Because, especially I think it was good for the fan base to see that too, because, a big criticism of Jerry is that he's like too robotic, and he's, too much of a GM, quote unquote,
Plays fantasy baseball.
Yeah. And that's, and that's conflicted with how he's tried to present himself over the years that he's been here, as well as trying to be like the super transparent guy.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this before, how like it kind of, has felt at times that like Jerry is like at conflict with himself, because he's still like trying to be an executive, but he's also trying to be super transparent. And you can kind of see him like grappling with that in real time at times when he's like speaking into a microphone. So yeah, I thought it was just a nice, like, real, like, human moment from those guys. I can't imagine how much it hurts for those guys right now. Obviously the players, but just for everyone that's like been super involved in this and put so many hours into this thing over the last, 8-9 months. Lastly, Jerry is saying that, Naylor is a priority, but also they don't want to say too much to the media until they actually talk to the player, all that stuff, all the typical stuff you expect to hear. But yeah, I mean, like, not a surprise at all. Naylor's a priority. We've talked about this. Of the three big free agents that they have hitting the market, he's clearly the guy of the three of them. So we're going to talk more about Josh Naylor in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So again, very clearly, Josh Naylor is the Mariners' priority heading into this winter. But what's he going to make? And that's a pretty big question that I'm not still super sure on. You and I, Colby, we've talked about this a little bit amongst ourselves, but I think we have like a general idea of where he might wind up landing. But what kind of contract do you think Josh Naylor is going to wind up getting when it's all said and done?
Yeah, it's a little tough to say. There's not a ton of great comps here. I mean, Naylor is a first baseman who doesn't hit for traditional first base power. He's hit 30 home runs once, but it came at quite a bit of sacrifice to his batting average and his on base. So there's kind of a do you want him to be a 30 homer guy, or do you want him to be the guy that we saw last year? I mean, there's kind of that whole thing. He's also 29, I believe, going to be 29, 28, 29. So that's a good age to hit free agency. So that's a plus on his side. A lot of first basemen don't reach free agency until 30, 31. The body type is going to be something that's going to be held against him, unfortunately. That's just kind of the way it works. How does that age, so to speak? So I think that'll lower more of his years, not his AAV, average annual value, if you guys don't know. Basically, what's the average take-home pay through the course of the contract? So yeah, it's a little bit of a gray area here. Like Christian Walker got 20 million, but Christian Walker was 34, but Walker was also a plus defensive first baseman. Naylor's merely good at first base, and Walker was 35 home run guy. Naylor's a 20 home run guy. So it's a little tough to nail this home, but I do think that my hunch is that Naylor is looking for 4 to 5 years at 20 million per. And I think the market is probably going to limit him to 3 to 4 years guaranteed. Maybe there's an option somewhere out there for him. I don't think he's going to get 5 guaranteed years from anybody. And I think ultimately, because of the first base, because he's only had 1 3-win season in his career, it was last year, or this year, I should say. And because, a big part of that value is the stolen bases, and people are going to wonder how repeatable that is.
Yeah.
I think he's probably going to be looking at somewhere between, on the low end, $16 million a year on a 4 or 5 year deal, or 3-4 year deal, maybe a 5th year option. And at the high end, 20, 21, somewhere in that range. He's not going to get Pete Alonso. He's not going to get, I'd honestly, I'd be pretty surprised if he got Christian Walker, even though he's better than Christian Walker, but he wasn't last year when Walker signed. So yeah, ultimately the number I keep coming down to is about 18 million per on about 3 or 4 years. So that's kind of where I'm at. Obviously, if it's 18, it could be 20, could be 16, but I think I'm landing somewhere in the 470 range, plus or minus, a couple $1,000,000 here or there. And keep in mind, the Mariners can maneuver it where he only makes $6 million this next year. And then in the final year of his contract, he makes 24 or whatever. Right. So it's not just a straight pay line. Like it's not just 15 a year for 4 years, but I do think the average is going to be, my hunch would be somewhere around 18 million up to about 20, 21 million.
Yeah. So, for all the reasons that you mentioned, again, first 3-win season ever this year. Big reason for that, the stolen bases. How repeatable is that? I don't think any team, especially the Mariners, is going to buy into that being repeatable. Because again, it's the, second percentile in sprint speed, all that. Obviously, he's an incredibly smart baseball player. But is he going to steal 30 bags again? Would love to see him try. But that's probably not going to factor into the negotiations in any sort of like serious manner. I have a hard time seeing that. Like I'm sure he and his representation will try to have that factor into things, but I don't know if any team is really going to take that too seriously. The other thing though is the shoulder. How much is that going to get flagged by teams, and how much is that going to hurt him in negotiations? Maybe not at all. It's possible that teams just and the Mariners especially, they just don't see it as much of a long-term thing. But obviously it's something that he dealt with all year long. He was able to play through it. Did he make it worse playing through it? There's a lot of questions involved in that probably more so teams on the outside rather than the Mariners have. The Mariners probably already have a very, very good idea of where he is health-wise. But I guess if we're going to, talk about potential concerns here, what might get in the way of the Mariners being able to bring him back, to me, it starts with the Mets. What's going on with them and Pete Alonso?
Sure.
If Pete Alonso signs elsewhere, he feels like such an Angel signing, by the way.
Yeah.
But let's just say, Pete Alonso goes elsewhere. Doesn't have to be the Angels. He just goes elsewhere. I feel like the Mets would probably pivot to Josh Naylor if he's still around. Maybe he's not around by that point.
I mean, part of this is why you want the Mariners to get things done pretty quick. Like, don't give yourself the opportunity. But also, I would just say, to that idea, Josh Naylor strike you as a New York City kind of guy.
No, but money talks, and I do worry about getting in a bidding war with Steve Cohen.
Sure, but like if the money is, hey, do you want 80 million from the Mets or do you want 70 million from the Mariners? I feel like that's pretty easy. 70 mil plus the whole income tax thing. We're not going to get into the whole no state income tax. It's not as cut and dry as people think, but it is a factor and it's something that we're never going to get into, but agents and players certainly do, take home pay and all that. But Naylor to me doesn't strike me as I guess really even an East Coast kind of guy, but I mean, Cleveland, East Coast adjacent, like kind of.
He didn't choose to be in Cleveland, though, Right.
And he's from your neck of the woods, which is close to the East Coast, so it's certainly possible. I don't know. He doesn't strike me as a New York guy, but sure, there are going to be other teams bidding, even if it's not the Mets.
Yeah,
and so I think it'd be great if they could get this thing done. He's not a free agent officially until 5 days after the last game of the World Series, so I'm sure Naylor wants some time right now to just kind of, but if you're Jerry and Justin, you might want to get on the phone and be like, hey, Josh, what gets this done now? Like, which would be very hard.
I'm going to assume that he's going to want to, go see what's out there for him and all that. I mean, he's a new father, all that, like, he's going to want to do what's best for him and his family. And, as he should, he's earned that right, to explore all that. But, I do think, like, if you're the Mariners, you need to get on this as soon as possible.
Yeah, no reason to wait around and then be left, at the altar. Like, you can't be in a situation where like your plan is Carlos Santana, and then at the last minute that gets ripped away, and you're like, oh well. Also, you shouldn't be in a plan. You shouldn't have a plan where Carlos Santana is the key to your entire plan. But we saw this happen last year, and the Mariners didn't pivot well after that happened.
Well, and the thing too is like, you want to try and get this done before Pete Alonso signs.
Mm-hmm.
But also, is Naylor going to want to sign before Pete Alonso signs?
I don't think anybody reasonably thinks that Naylor is going to get Pete Alonso money. So I don't know how connected their markets are.
I don't think it's because of that, but I do think it's like, all right, well, now Alonso's off the board. Now I'm the next best guy at this position. Like
maybe. I don't know. Like it's tough. I don't know Naylor that well. He's only been here for a couple months, so I don't really. And I don't know if you know this or not, Ty. He doesn't like to let people in. Like he's a very private person. So it's tough to really know, like have good feel for whether or not Naylor. I mean, he said all the right things. Everybody seems to imply that he likes it here.
Yeah.
But you just don't know. You don't know. And like, he seems to like hitting at this ballpark. It appears he was not lying about that. We'll see. I think the Mariners certainly have a major advantage over everybody else in these negotiations. So that's good. We talked about this, when they acquired him, like even if the Mariners hadn't gotten Josh Naylor, we assumed he was going to be very high on their big board for free agents or on their wish list. And now they've had him for a couple months. They know he works in the clubhouse. They've said as much. They've said that he's their priority. So you really, really hope they get this one done. I don't have a great feel for how the market's going to go this year because of the lockout, how many teams are going to be less willing to spend because they're quote unquote worried about not having, not making money in 2027 or the TV deal, like all the excuses that will be used. Will that apply to the Mariners? It has in the past. So, but I do think Naylor's probably going to get somewhere in that $18 to $20 million range for 3 to 4 years. I think the shorter the deal, the bigger the AAV. And if the Mariners were willing to go 5 years, they'd get this done pretty quick. But I don't think they're going to be willing to go 5, and I don't really blame them for that. But I expect them to be a very competitive offer. And I would say if I was handicapping it today, I would say the Mariners have like a 60% chance to re-sign Naylor.
I have a hard time seeing him not be in a Mariners uniform in 2026 and beyond. I'll say that for whatever that's worth, which isn't a ton, but like,
I think most Mariner fans, it might be more devastating to them if Naylor was wearing a different uniform next year than, game 7. Like, talk about like Mariner fans, they embrace guys fast. They've really embraced Josh Naylor.
Well, it's also like, it works. He works in the ballpark. Like, once you identify those guys, and there haven't been too many of those guys that have come through here, like you kind of need to hold on to them as much as you can. So, it would hurt. Like it would hurt a lot if they weren't able to get this done. But plus, I think they'll get it done. I do too. I do think they will get it done.
Let's get it done early though, so we don't have this hanging over our heads the entire winter. And also, just to put this out there, if not Josh Naylor, what's the plan at first base?
God. Yeah.
Doing the Luke Raley thing again? Giving Luis Arraez $15 million.
Yeah.
Even though he's only worth like $5 million. Just get this done.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.